Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. I've just been picked on for 5 minutes for being too negative.
You're an easy target, Michael.
What can I say? I am. I'm the epicenter of negativity. I'm in Buffalo. It's like I was a Leaf fan. Gee, to give me a reason to be positive. Okay, we'll start with the pre-show. We got some stuff to talk about today. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, this may surprise Kevin, and it may not, but the numbers are in for the Olympics, and they're horrible. It's down 51% viewership. So they had around 26 million viewers, and that's not nearly close to what they had in Rio. And so advertisers are upset. Like this, what this does to NBC is it hurts them for the next Olympics for the number they could get for their advertising, unless they make it up to these companies over the next year or something for what they didn't feel like they got in return for the money they paid. But the bigger question is, now that the Olympics are over, pushing the athletes aside, because we know there's an important function in that, it's still about money. And Kev, I don't think it paid off around the world like they thought it would.
Well, no, but I think, we're going through the same thing, and I haven't looked at the ratings lately for baseball and everything, but, we know during the COVID that numbers were on the decline because people discovered there's a lot they can do and they didn't need sports. And, I know there's concern about what the hockey numbers are going to be for this new contract. I talked about it with the general manager who said, that he's had several conversations with other GMs going, boy, I hope the numbers are good, because they really haven't been good in any of the sports. And they're also concerned about what this new spread of the Delta variant is, what impact it's going to have on their attendance as well. So, and the renewal of season tickets hasn't gone as well as they had hoped either. So, the point of all that is not to spread negativity. But the point of it is just to say, we're just not out of it yet.
We're not out of it yet, but I do think there, and I am not for just ignoring the virus and being, it's like, just, going around with blinders. But, in watching baseball over the weekend, seeing 43,000 people at Yankee Stadium, I think people are saying, okay, it's a reality. We're going to be dealing with this ongoing for years to come. It's, but I think it's just like, we're going to go about and live our life. And if we have to deal now, and that's not to say I'm for being vaccinated. I'm not for somebody, and I know that the Yankees and the Red Sox have been decimated with COVID positives. I mean, they've lost Garrett Cole. They've lost Rizzo. The Red Sox lost JD Martinez. Professional sports and people in general, I think, are just saying it's a reality. Get vaccinated, but we're going to go about our lives. And
I'll tell you this. I think Anthony and I were both at Citizens Bank over the weekend, and they're doing something good there, which I think and hope other stadiums are doing. And that is, hey, if you're outside, don't worry about it. But if you go to the bathroom or you're in the elevator, we would like you to wear your mask. So I still did bring a mask into the ball.
I will tell you, Russ, being at the ballpark, that the mask, certainly the employees were there, but the fans, in terms of having masks in the restroom, no.
They didn't do it because I didn't go at all, so I couldn't tell you that.
No, there were no masks in the restroom.
When I went to a Blue Jays Yankees game in June here in Buffalo, the rule was outside no mask, inside mask. And even then, when maybe people were feeling more comfortable before the Delta variant really kicked into gear, people were waiting in beer lines, long lines, and half were wearing masks and half weren't. Now, today is a day that I've been looking forward to, which is the day that the Canada-U.S. border opened up. Now, it's with limitations. You have to provide a negative PCR test to be able to get in, but at least that's something that is easily gettable. And, for somebody like me who's going to be going up to Canada multiple times starting next month, knock on wood, it's just the price I'm going to have to pay to go and cover Leafs training camp and go to cover games. I'm willing to do that. Hopefully that becomes not necessary going forward, but that's the reality. We're in the new world. This is the new world.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the league does with access. I went to the first time when I covered the junior showcase in Plymouth here. It was the first direct interviewing I had done in over 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was odd. The players would suddenly come out and you'd be standing there one-on-one and you realize you're 3 feet from, what's
Even
spewing
I
out.
didn't experience it my last time there a few months ago, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so it was a little bit different. And the weird thing about that is I ended up getting sick. I don't think it was related to the in fact, I know it wasn't, but it was my family basically ended up with the flu, not just the regular flu. And it just circulated through, it started with my 3-year-old grandson, who I'm sure brought it from school, and it went through us. So right after going to that, when I'm I didn't even really give it any thought except for the moment when the interview was occurring. But, when I was going home at night, I was thinking, geez, I hope I didn't, catch anything, because there had been some stuff going around at that thing. And lo and behold, that night I woke up in the middle of the night. I was sicker than a dog. So
well, I have to say this: from March of last year, when the pandemic started, to this summer, I never had the flu, not once.
I know I haven't gotten anything.
And and Anthony, like, it was like 3 or 4, normally 3 or 4 times a year, I'll have a cold, stuffed up and chest cold and whatever, and it's always wonderful to be around me when that happens. Mm-hmm. But this time, probably most likely because of the masks.
Yeah, that's the thing. We've been, honestly, it's a combination of the distancing. We've been, in tighter circles, not so being amongst a large number of people. Yeah, I got a nasal drip. I think it was sometime in July, when I was in Florida. It wasn't COVID, but it was just like we got back and I was just like, I remember it was right before we went down and I had it. And I was like, this, but it had been circulating amongst a number of people at that point. So I'm like, yeah, I'm opened up, and the first time that I have not felt like this in a long time. So,
but don't you think, like somebody in the chat was saying, don't you think that this is, the precautions that we're going to be taking going forward are sort of going to be like what we do when we get on an airplane? We have to take off our shoes and this and that.
Yeah, it'll be like that.
We're going to get used to it and having every once in a while to wear masks, or I never got the flu shot, but because I'm not a big fan of needles, but when it came to COVID, I did get the shot because
I never get a flu shot, but I did it this year because people pointed out that if you got the flu and you didn't have the COVID shot, it could be really bad. And I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to get it. And I got all the shots this year.
Yeah, we're pretty regular with ours. We're regular. But again, my wife's a physician, so she's going to be on us about getting the shot. So,
well, it's really remarkable when you get old like me is that you go to your pharmacist now. It's just amazing to me that they have just a permanent record of shingles and pneumonia, and I go to CVS and they've kept track of that. And mine goes back. I asked her when they first started charting that. She goes, "Well, yours goes back to 2008." So they've been charting all that. So it's nice to actually go in and they're saying, you're overdue for your shingles, and boom, you got it. It's actually. People don't like the big brother watching, but I actually like it when it comes to your medical concerns.
Yeah. So, okay, let's get started. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, August 9th, 2021.
I'm Anthony Mingione from Off the Post Radio.
Russ Cohen from Off the Post Radio.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello of Off the Post Radio and Hockey Buzz, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Boy, I'm surprised I didn't trip on that. Okay, starting off with a rather significant signing. Carter Hart, who was a restricted free agent, signed a 3-year extension and I have to say, I hate this. Let's have the contract be the number of the player. With Austin Matthews,
the Flyers didn't want to get it to $4 million, so they're like, let's get it nice and close.
Right, it was 11.6.
Wink, wink. Yeah,
3-4 million, and Mitch Marner did 93 because he's a big Doug Gilmour fan. So Carter Hart does a 3-year extension at $3.979 million. Mm-hmm. So basically $4 million. I'll take the extra 21,000. Send it my way. Anthony, we'll start with you. I think we saw this coming. I think we talked about this. Hart was probably a candidate for a bridge or an extended bridge, and this is a 3-year deal based on the year that he had last year. It's sort of like the team is not sure, and he doesn't want to go any further because a 5 or 6 year deal was probably going to be less than he actually wanted. So this is sort of a compromise on both sides.
And this is what bridge deals usually are. This is exactly what a bridge deal does. So, you're taking into account his first 2 seasons, which were, really good. and he had a substantial. And he obviously had a substantial. Michael?
We lost your audio for a second. At least
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, you have 2 years of pretty good play on a relative upswing. Second year, very good, especially going into March of 2020. He was on an outstanding. His home record was fantastic. But as Russ has always pointed out, and he's correct in doing this, Hart's performances on the road still needed to be better. And last season, obviously, I think for anybody who is a creature of habit like Carter Hart is, he is very much, like we all know with goaltenders, they are, creatures of routine. Last year, getting any kind of routine or practice to work on things that might be not going, that might be failing, didn't get that much of a window. He really struggled, and it was certainly got exacerbated. He was struggling already, but certainly the Lake Tahoe game really put into sharp focus his struggles. And again, this is also a way that it allows Hart to have some certainty with going forward. It gives the Flyers, as they are getting ready to also negotiate between now and obviously August 26th, Travis Sanheim's contract. This deal was about what I expected. I figured it was going to be either 3 years or 4 years. His chance for a long-term deal, again, his struggles last season threw that out the window. He might have gotten 5, might have gotten 6. But this what happened last season, I think, really made it the 3 to 4 year bridge deal. The path that both sides were going to get to was just a matter of what the number was going to be. And $4 million was around that number that I figured he was going to be getting.
Russ.
Yeah, it's interesting because before last season began, there was talk of like a long-term deal in the works for Hart, and it didn't happen. Who knows if they ever even spoke about it, but he certainly would have gotten it probably mid-season had he had a good season. And because he didn't, now it turns out in the club's favor right now. But if Hart picks it up this year, the club's really not going to make out on it because he'll make it up on the back end.
Yes.
So, it'll be interesting. I would just say this. This is where sports is very unpredictable. And Flyers fans, probably when they were all putting out those numbers a year ago, on what they were going to have to pay Carter Hart, they probably never realized they would only have to pay this for Carter Hart. And that's why we can never count on all these things as certainties because you just never know.
We can only base, again, on the performance. And, again, first 2 years of his career, he did not have a sophomore slump. He had a very strong sophomore season.
Right.
So it was year 3 that, in specific circumstances, and we're not going to call this necessarily a normal season. I still think we're going to have some things that are going to be happening. But is there more of a chance for him to be able to have time to work on things, to adjust to things? I mean, literally having to sit him down during, at a certain point during the season because of his struggles, and having, Brian Elliott have to take the load. Literally they had to carve out that time, and he showed improvement. But then they obviously had the MCL sprain, and they figured, let's call it for now.
But Kevin, this deal provides the Flyers a little bit of protection in the sense that it's 1 year short of UFA. So if after 3 years and he has good years, if he maintains or recovers and gets on a positive track, they've got an opportunity here to sign him to a long-term extension. But, if he wants to move on, if he has 3 good years and they're not paying him what you would consider top money for a goaltender, he's 1 year away from unrestricted free agency, and he can test the market.
Yeah, I mean, this was a little bit of a tricky negotiation, I would assume, just because, you wanted to give him enough money to him to understand that the Flyers haven't lost any confidence with him, that he's still their guy, that they still think he's the best. Because, confidence is so important with goalies. On the other hand, you didn't want to overpay him because you don't quite know where he's at. We don't know where his head was at. And then you have the flat cap situation. Like, unless you're a defenseman, nobody really wanted to pay you this summer, at least not a big money. If you're a defenseman, we'll give you money because, we think defensemen are harder to find, and they were this summer in terms of free agents and such. So I think it was a little bit tricky, and I think both sides were happy with it. And to be honest, I had a GM mention this to me. It was a little easier to get players to take a bridge contract this time because of the flat caps. It was actually beneficial for both sides for the bridge because of the flat cap. They really didn't want to go long term. The teams didn't. Players felt that with the flat cap, they weren't really going to be able to push the envelope the way they would under normal times. So they were happy to take a shorter deal. And the final thing I would say on it is years ago, I had the benefit of being on a panel at the rookie gathering that they have with NHL rookies, and I did a media panel. And while I was there, I popped into a couple of seminars that they have for rookies. And one of those seminars was about how much money and that you need to earn in order to be kind of set for life. And they brought in a bunch of financial analysts, and the figure was $6 million that you needed to have banked and put in. And if you take $12 million, which is basically what he's getting on this 3-year deal, you take out 50% taxes that'll have to pay on that, you get $6 million. So if he puts that in investments, he can have an income of $250,000 per year after he retires, which he'll be able to live on. So that's just a little bit of bonus. Why $6 million is kind of important in terms for a hockey player.
That sounds good to me.
One more important number too. So the Flyers are just over $4 million in cap space with Travis Sanheim as an RFA. That's going to be pushed right to the wall there as far as salary.
Yeah,
and that's done on purpose, Anthony.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean this is how they've budgeted things out, and now they're at the point now where they're going to tell they're going to want them under that $4 million number.
Right.
They're going to want them under. They need to have at least some wiggle room, some space, and Sanheim's going to want obviously have more. Going to have more than that. But the interesting part for him is that they're looking. I don't think you want to go with the 2-year deal per se. I think you want to have.
Travis, we'd love to pay you more, but we just don't have the cap space. So how about $3.75 million?
Yeah, and you know what? Though, that's for sure.
Now the key for me will also be, if that is your figure, the term is also going to be important as well. Sanheim wasn't the greatest season last season. I think he struggled at times, certainly with Phil. Sure. With Phil, he and Phil Myers as a pairing certainly struggled. It could have been better. So Philly's definitely going to be able. I think the number ends up probably being around 3.75. The question is the length of the deal. They want it, whether it goes 4, 5. I'd probably not. Maybe
I don't think he would go that far.
No. I don't think he would go that far. I think at this point now, that number is going to be 3.75. You probably go 3-year deal, and you get at least 1 year of UFA.
He might only go 2 years on that.
Honestly. Right. He might. Yeah, and then basically that.
But at that point, you can get a 2-year award in arbitration.
Well, right, but and I don't know how
he didn't file for arbitration, so he can't.
Yeah,
but the Flyers did in this.
Anthony, what the compromise might be says, okay, I'll take 3.75, but you walk me to unrestricted free agency. It's a 2-year deal. I'll take less, but that's the cherry.
Now that becomes a even more narrow window in terms of their what their contention status is. They're trying to push, to try to be in the final, get to a conference final, get to the Stanley Cup final, while Claude Giroux is still a productive player.
Now, Kevin, you touched on the defensive salaries, and I just saw the breakdown of the Darnell Nurse contract, and I thought it was very interesting in that the first 4 years there is no signing bonus, none. He gets overpaid 10, 12, 10.4, and 10, I think, the first 4 years, but no signing bonus. And these are the years where escrow is going to be high, so they're actually not going to be paying as much, though that exact money, or at least he's not going to be getting that exact amount of money. And then the last 4 years, it's $6 million a year in signing bonuses. So it was a very interestingly structured deal.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of discussion on social media about whether or not they overpaid him. There's no question they overpaid him.
Yes.
Like, he's a very good defenseman, and everybody would want him. But they had to pay a little more. But they had to. That's what you got to do. It's why Columbus paid Ruchinski what they did. They had just lost Seth Jones. It was a public relations nightmare. They keep losing people. Did we think it was a coincidence that he got just a tiny bit more than Seth Jones? No, it was not a coincidence. So they had to make a statement. And I think the Oilers did exactly the same thing with Nurse. They lost Adam Larson, and Nurse is a better defenseman, obviously, than Larson. So you got to get him tied up. So I think that's actually a good signing. They did what they had to do, and I think that's all you can ask of a general manager.
Well, I also think we could look at it this way too, Kev. If Edmonton doesn't win in the next 3 years, there's going to be major changes, including GM, including Connor McDavid, including a lot of things there. So they're not looking like someone like Ken Holland's not really worried about anything past year 3 anyhow, because he won't get a 4th year. I don't think he'll even be there.
No, but they do have to worry about what the average salary is for salary consideration.
And what I think the interesting effect will be is next year's free agents, whether they be RFA or UFA, on the blue line. And I'm looking at the list right now. Letang is a veteran guy, but Parayko, Ristolainen, Morgan Riley, Charlie McAvoy's an RFA. What effect it's going to have on the salaries of those players? Because nobody in that group, although good defenseman, is at the level of a Makar or a Nurse or a Heiskanen. But
you left that out of Fox, because now that he won a Norris, he's going to be in that conversation.
Right, but what usually happens is the next wave gets overpaid after the first wave gets overpaid, and then like teams like the Islanders are not going to pay Ryan Pulock $8 million, but he's probably going to ask for $7.5 to $8 million. So
we know that's what the market brought us here this offseason.
Now, Anthony, I know you got to leave early, so I want to touch on this before you have to go. John Cooper named Team Canada head coach for Beijing, which again we still don't know whether they're going to Beijing. Pretty good group of assistant coaches: Bruce Cassidy, Peter DeBoer, and Barry Trotz. I don't think there's going to be any shortage of quality opinions and tactics in that room.
I would think not. Although again, the interesting wrinkle, as Russ had brought up, is that Cooper had been in the U.S. U.S. coaching system. So
but he fully established he was Canadian. Like much to the chagrin of U.S.
But apparently, Kev, he wasn't asked to be in the 2017 Worlds, and he talked about that. So that apparently was a factor.
Well, I think the factor was, at least when he's talked about it in interviews, has been his father and this Canadian heritage and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't catch. Well, it caught the U.S. a little bit by surprise when he announced, but he was upfront about it for a long time now. Yeah.
It's Canada can call their shot when it comes to putting together a coaching staff and a roster. So. Cooper, he certainly has earned this opportunity. 2 Stanley Cups. Team's been continuously in the upper echelon. He knows how to handle star players. He's shown that as well. So this was the next step.
I was I almost expected the specter of Mike Babcock to emerge here, but I thought there was an outside chance that with somebody who won
negative.
What's that?
So the specter of Mike Babcock.
With his history of winning 2 gold medals, I thought, okay, not that he was going to be head coach, because I thought Cooper winning 2 consecutive
on the staff.
Yeah, I thought he would possibly be on the staff, but
I don't think you could put Babcock not as the coach on any staff. I just don't.
Yeah, and he's not. The NHL is such a big part of it that he's not on an NHL team. So
Yep. Ralph Kruger was part of Team Canada's coaching staff when he was not the Oilers coach. I think he was coaching in Switzerland at that point. So I think Jacques Lemaire was part of their staff too when he was gone from Minnesota or gone from Jersey. So they have brought in sort of that veteran overseer type coach. I thought there was a possibility, since he did win two Olympic gold medals, that he'd be included, but no.
See, I got to tell you though, this hits me personally because Nassau Community College is right next to Hofstra, and they always had this rivalry. Hofstra, was a full-fledged college. Nassau was, 2-year, and then you could transfer to Hofstra or go somewhere else. But there was always this rivalry. Cooper went to Hofstra, and now I feel like I could have this rivalry against Cooper because he's with Canada and not the U.S. So I'm during those Olympics, I will not be a fan of John Cooper at all.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
I will channel that.
Thank you. On Twitter this morning, the Pittsburgh Penguins informed everyone that Mike Lang, their Hall of Fame broadcaster, play-by-play man, was retiring after 46 years. Now, I've had the pleasure of listening to him on a number of occasions, not as much as people in the Pittsburgh area, but I said on when I saw it posted on Facebook, Kev, this is a generation of broadcasters that we were fortunate enough to listen to. I mean, if Lang, Pete Weber, Joe Bowen in Toronto, Rick Jenneret in Buffalo, and obviously Doc Emmerich in terms of a national broadcast. And he's retiring. I don't believe there's a health issue here. I think he's just after a number of years just wants to rest and recreate with his family. But we were lucky to hear all these great announcers, and give me your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, for sure, you're absolutely right, Mike. Yeah, I think there has been some health issues in recent years, but I think it's just the nagging stuff that just make it difficult to continue in your regular job. But Mike Lang, even amongst the greats, stood out because of his unique style, and it was a little bit gimmicky to it, but in a very entertaining way. He beat him like a rented mule. Yeah. And scratched my back with a hacksaw. Yeah. And Elvis has just left the building. Those are memorable catchphrases that endeared him to not only the Pittsburgh fan base, but those who happened to tune in and suddenly heard it for the first time and laughed aloud. I don't even know what that means, but I love it. It being like a rented mule, or scratch my back with a hacksaw.
Okay, Jenneret with a thought like La 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 Fontaine, or Top Shelf where Mama hides the cookies. That's what people remember.
Right. I'll give you a quick Lang story. In 2014, I went and covered Game 7 between the Penguins and the Rangers. Lundqvist had a 35 save, maybe a shutout. I can't remember if it was a shutout or not. Might have been. And I was hanging out after, talking to probably Metzer and a few other Pittsburgh people. Mike Lang's just strolled out. And he starts talking about the game, and he said, that was one of the finest performances I've ever seen in this building from an opposing goaltender. And that Mike Lang voice. And it was amazing to get that conversation going with him about that and get that perspective because, I thought it was a pretty big win. That's why I just went to cover that game because I knew it would be a terrific game and would be a lot of content. But then he really put a great perspective on it.
But, again, I've mentioned this before, and I just have to mention it because we're talking about play-by-play guys. I'm really fortunate. I'm 54 years old. I'm old enough to have remembered listening to Danny Gallivan on Hockey Night in Canada, on Montreal Canadiens games, Bob Cole throughout the years on Leaf games, Ted Darling in Buffalo, Fred Cusick in Boston. Dan Kelly on the USA Network games. To be able to have heard those announcers and then the following generation that I mentioned. How fortunate, and even going to other sports. I listened to Ernie Harwell on Detroit Tigers games. There
are legendary guys out there. I was a big Bill Chadwick guy, and while I was writing 100 Ranger Greats with John Halligan, Chadwick had passed. And Halligan wrote wrote out his passing in the New York Times. And so he passed it on to me. I put it on my website, and, it was tremendous because that guy taught me the game of hockey. My family didn't know about hockey. I didn't know about hockey, but, Halligan's obituary was tremendous. And Jim Gordon, I just loved. I loved him in any sport. So yeah, you just had these guys, and he was one of those guys, and it's not to say the next guy can't be that guy, because he can be to 20-year-olds. That's the beauty of it. Well, but the only thing that I worry about is if these guys don't get to travel for radio, then they can't be that guy. And that's the issue.
And that's the thing, Kev. I was going to bring that up, and Russ beat me to the punch. The reality. No, it's okay. The reality of what is going to happen post-pandemic, after it's been determined that the announcers can announce just as well, at least to the networks or the teams, sitting in a booth, sitting in their broadcast booth at the arena when the team is in Anaheim. Or, they're probably never going to be traveling again unless it's playoffs. So, I mean, whether, and also the fact that, I mean, and I'm not spreading this to everybody, but I don't get the feeling that that the announcers now are more cookie cutter, that there's not as much personality as there used to be. There's not, nobody's trying to be extremely unique. They're all trying to sort of stay in the lane. And I think that's sort of boring. I like exuberant personalities. I like creativity in the broadcast booth. And I don't know if we're going to see that as much.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the modern broadcaster has been turned away from being that creative force. They want him more of a generic. They don't want personalities. And the second element they're fighting against is, we're close to the death of radio hockey. And they're heading toward certainly to simulcast. And it has everything to do with the number of people who actually listen to a game. It's just not significant enough. That maybe in some of the larger cities you can make a case for it, but in most of the NHL cities, when you talk to folks, they feel, when the current broadcaster leaves, or maybe they'll even force them out, they may just go to a simulcast just because it's just not a significant number. It used to be a relatively good source of revenue, and it just isn't anymore. So the people will pay for it.
I think, like in Toronto, if it wasn't for the fact that Sportsnet owns one radio station, TSN owns the other radio station, and they're co-owners of the Leafs, that the radio broadcast there would maybe be going the way of the dodo bird. And like Russ, the Islanders are on the Hofstra College station. So
they I don't know if they still are. They were on
ESPN radio during the playoffs, but I think the regular season games were on the Hofstra College.
It might still be, which is again a very low wattage station, and it's just that part hurts me too, because
let me give you just a couple of more sayings from our friend Mr. Lang, just to give you an idea of how he called the
signing after Mike.
Yeah, call Arnold Slick from Turtle Creek, which is one of my favorites. And oh Lord Stanley, Stanley, bring me the brandy. Let's see here. Shave my face with a rusty razor and scratch my back with a hacksaw, that I already mentioned. These are his top 10. Buy Sam a drink and get his dog one too, which he'd say after a great play or a goal. Let's see here. Let's go hunt moose on a Harley. When things were going well. Then you used any opposing goalie's name and just add, like Mike Smith just lost his liquor license. If he made a poor play, he's smiling like the butcher's dog. And she wants to sell my monkey. I don't even know what that one's about.
Yeah, I don't get that one. I don't get that one.
Yeah. Doesn't know whether to cry or wind his wristwatch when he'd get beat, obviously on a play. And he beat him like a random mule was his number 3. And get in the fast lane, Grandma. The bingo game is ready to roll, which is number 2. And then, of course,
Elvis has left the building.
And Elvis has just left the building, which was Mike Lang's way of telling you that the game is safely in hand, and you no longer had to sweat. So and just getting back to the point that Mike made, which was a good one. We don't have that personnel anymore, and again, I think it's frowned upon. When I started writing, I go way back. Obviously, I was writing on a typewriter, in the 1970s. And we had just come out of the era where if you were covering, for example, a basketball game, instead of saying he scored on a basket, you say he scorched the twine, or in hockey it was the corded cottage, that kind of thing. And then that was just considered silly. But now, if you wrote that way, I think people would find it a little bit appealing because we haven't seen.
I think they would, because it would open their eyes like it's something different now.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not so sure because I'm going outside of sports, but I don't feel like, maybe in editorials, but I don't feel like media now. I don't think there's any room for like a Mike Royko from Chicago or a Jimmy Breslin in New York. I don't think they want that anymore. They want everybody to write like it's AP wire copy. And
in a way, but the one thing about, since you brought up Breslin, and I grew up in that era and I would read him, the one thing about him is you wanted to read his next column no matter what. He had you to the point where so they still want those guys. They just don't want to pay them what they're worth anymore. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We went through a period in the 1980s when comedy was king. We had Mike Downey was a sports columnist here in Detroit, and he'd always have a real glib way to get into a column. I remember he was writing about Dave Kingman when Kingman was with the A's.
Yeah.
And he wrote a column, and he goes, the first thing that you notice about Dave Kingman is that the middle S is missing on his cap. That was his lead. Think about that for a while. But
yeah.
And I the other thing I remember too is that it was just simple. When the Tigers, they had started out 35-5 in '84, which is an incredible start. And it was so anticlimactic when they actually won, clinched the pennant, and Mike Downey just wrote as his lead, call Yogi, tell him it's over. Which was just the perfect way to start his column. Well, we don't see that anymore. We don't see that style of writing anymore.
No, and you also don't see, and maybe in New York because they have so much, so many things to talk about. But in Buffalo, for example, Mike Harrington is really good as a columnist for the Buffalo News, and does not shy away from being critical, especially of the Sabres, because the Sabres have enough reason for him to be critical. But Jerry Sullivan, who was the columnist for the Buffalo News for years, he was constantly negative and ripping on the Bills and the Sabres for good reason. I don't know whether newspapers around the country have that column or want the columnist anymore who is going to point out the things that need to be pointed out and be critical of.
I think that's all they want now.
Okay.
No, they want that.
Yeah, that's all they want.
They didn't want that. Larry Brooks wouldn't have a job.
Yeah. They don't. I think they don't. The columnist they don't want anymore is the comedian.
Now I will say this, and this is, I think, fair. They do want a Larry Brooks, Kev, but then they do want another person who covers the club that is a little kinder, gentler too, and the Post has that. I'm not going to name the other person.
Well, if
they do.
They usually don't have the staff size in anymore.
They can afford it, but most don't. You're right.
Yeah. I just look at my own paper that I was with for 35 years. In our height, we had 110 people in the sports department. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they're under 50 now, so they're covering the entire country. With fewer than 50 people.
Wow.
In all kinds of sports. And, they don't have a hockey writer anymore. And, we used to have, 4 or 5 baseball writers. I think there's 2 there now. So it's just all changed.
I did want to mention a signing, Mike.
Yep, go ahead.
One that, definitely went under the radar. It's not a big player. The other day, Joe Gambardella got signed from, he was an Edmonton product, and the Devils signed him. And I think it's a good signing because it's a 2-way deal. I have a quick story about Gambardella. So, and I always tell people, look, I'm not a scout. I'm a guy who likes to write about prospects. I get into the prospect world. I talk to all people that are into it, and I learn, and I love it, right? And so at one of the East regionals for the NCAA, or whatever they call it, some are Southeast, but one of the regionals, I was watching the game, and I was sitting next to a director of amateur scouting. And so after the game, that guy asked me and somebody else next to me, well, who'd you like in that game? And I said, Joe Gambardella, the kid from Staten Island. He looked really good. I'd sign him. And the other guy said somebody else. And then this guy said, well, we signed this guy instead. He actually told us who he signed right as the game ended. But Edmonton signed him after that game. And he's a center. He's 27. And, when you come out of college late, he doesn't have a lot of years on him yet. And so that's a good depth signing because he's played like 15 NHL games. But you need guys like that can bounce back and forth, and especially in the COVID era now. So I like the signing, and I like the fact that he is a New York kid, and now he's going to play in the metro area. That kind of stuff is good. I already got a text about it today, from someone from Staten Island, just to give you an example.
It's interesting, Russ, and I know you're a big baseball fan, so you can actually speak to this. But, yeah, it's normal standard operating procedure in the Major League Baseball for players to arrive when they're 24 and 25. And yet if an NHL player shows up, he's late. Boy, that's, and you hear that all the time, like, well, we like him, but he's already 24 or 25, like he's already past his prime.
Right, and the age of them being drafted is comparable. I mean, baseball, they're drafting them out of school, so 17 or 18 years old. But can we say that the preparatory leagues that hockey players play in, like in Europe or in Canadian Junior or the USHL, it prepares them for the pro game better than high school does for baseball. And it does take 4 or 5 years for these players to just sort of ramp up to get to the major leagues. Whereas hockey players, it's not that much of a jump because they've been preparing to play hockey at that level for a few years before they're drafted.
Yeah, I'll mention the chat room once we mentioned. I'll tweet out the player again afterwards. I'll tweet out the signing. You know what I think it is, Kev? I think it's the unknown of hockey. So I think more people kind of understand in baseball that if a guy doesn't make it by 26, 27, he's probably not going to make it, even though we see some instances, but it's very low. Where in hockey, I think it's the great unknown. And then I do think when they see 24 and he hasn't made it, sometimes they don't look to see what the path was. Like if he was like BCHL and then USHL or vice versa, then college, then AHL. I mean, then you are going to be 25, 26, 27 when you may hit in the NHL, maybe even 28. But it's not the norm. And I think we've all gotten spoiled in hockey because there was such an influx in the last decade of young players. Like I've never seen an influx of young players in any other sport that I've seen in hockey in the last decade.
Okay, Russ, just a little note here. Rick Carpinello, who covers the Rangers for The Athletic, tweeted out, "Do not, in caps, be surprised if Mika Zibanejad is in the deal that ultimately brings Jack Eichel to the Rangers." All I have to say about that is, okay, anybody who watched, and I suggest that you watched the Bob McCown podcast with our friend John Shannon. He had Mike Harrington and Scott Burnside on there, and they talked about the Eichel situation, and they basically said the Sabres right now are well within their rights to say, we're not trading you because we're not getting the value for you. And the Eichel camp is pushing back, but they really don't have a case here. The whole medical thing is clouding it. But from the Rangers' point of view, if you're trading Zibanejad for Eichel, where are you improving?
Well, I know Carpy gets good information, so I'm not going to doubt that. What I'm going to doubt is this just seems too easy and convenient for like the Drury administration, I'll call it, to just sweep away the problem of having to worry about what to do with Zibanejad if you do make the deal and he's not in it, and then you either have to sign him or trade him at the deadline or let him walk. And I'll be honest, if I were trading for Eichel, I would not have Zibanejad in it, because if I want to have a legitimate chance to win the division, I've got to have that 1-2 combo, and Ryan Strome can't be the two.
Right.
So I would do it. And I would have the guts to say, hey, if I can't get Zibanejad signed, then guess what? We'll let him walk, but we're trying to win this year. And then, of course, I'll trade his rights at the draft and get some sort of draft pick. But it just seems like Drury doesn't want to do that. And I don't understand that, because it's more than the second time I've heard him included in that deal.
And Kev, say for example, this is the direction that it goes and Zibanejad is included in the deal for Eichel. Zibanejad is not going to sign a long-term extension to stay in Buffalo. Buffalo is probably either going to flip him immediately or flip him at the deadline because they can't. They probably won't be willing to pay the money that he wants, or he doesn't want to play for a rebuilding team unless he wants, unless they overpay him. So I think this is sort of a non-starter. I don't know.
Yeah, well. That isn't the target that you would expect they would go after, but I could see why the Rangers, might consider throwing him in. But I agree with Russ. The guy to throw in is Strom, because they have to have guys to play. They have to have the floor and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So Strom would be the guy that I would put in there because they're trying to win now. But I'm surprised that the Rangers are still kind of hanging around.
I'm not shocked, Kev. I had this inkling a while back that they were interested and never, ever, ever heard that they were out of it. And again, there's always this thing about the Rangers where they're always trying to draw big names so they can.
Well, they also have a collection of younger players, which
they do, but that's not their history. Their history is always, we've got to have a big name here. So we can really market the hell out of the team. And now they do have to sell tickets again. It's not like the Rangers are selling out every night like they used to. So if you look at the team, there is no Lundqvist. They don't really have that big name yet. Maybe in 3 years we'll be saying Adam Fox is that big name. But, unfortunately, Panarin doesn't sell like that in New York. And so Eichel would. And that's probably some of the motivation there.
Well, but I think they can make the trade. Is my point. It's not easy to come up with 4, first round equivalents, but they have bunches of them.
Yeah, they could put either Kakko or Kravtsov. Those are 2 good starting points right there, one or the other. Like that's, so there's definitely they have the manpower to do it.
The defenseman Lundqvist would be probably part of the deal because they don't want to trade Miller probably.
No, Miller's not going to get traded in this deal. But
so they really could do it, and those players would be attractive because you're going to bring them right from the beginning. If they could get Lundqvist in the deal, just imagine their defensive core, their young defensive core. So
I know Power, Dahlin, Samuel. I mean, it would be really good. I mean,
it's really good. But here's the thing that I don't understand. If I was Buffalo, I would say to Jack Eichel, have the surgery. It's a shorter rehab time. And then I think you'd have an easier time getting you what you want out of the deal. I don't understand why they don't want him to have that surgery.
Well, I mean, I'm only guessing, but I would have to feel that it has to do with insurance more than anything because it's for an NHL player it's experimental, even though it's not experimental. We've had it described as the other athletes have had it, but they don't want to be the first team to say go ahead and do it. And I don't know whether that would make his contract not guaranteed or not coverable under insurance because they had a surgery that is not. I mean, apparently they have no problem with the neck fusion surgery, but they have a big problem with the disc replacement surgery. So that. And there doesn't seem to be any compromise. The Sabres are saying we're not going there, and Eichel is saying I'm not going to your direction. So it's a stalemate right now.
The other interesting thing is we look at it with from this Eichel perspective, and Harrington said on Sirius the other day, I happened to catch it. They don't have anybody to market. No. Like to try and sell tickets. Who are you marketing on this team, Kev?
Dylan Cousins.
That's tough. To add to the average guy to tell him about Dylan Cousins, it's going to take a little bit of an explanation. It's not like he's known all over Buffalo.
But Russ, I mean, I'm sorry, but the thing is, when you're going into a season with Craig Anderson and Aaron Dell as your goaltender,
I know.
Throw marketing out the window. Say to the city of Buffalo, we'll see you in September of 2022.
But no team can ever do that.
I know that. And what they'll be selling is, hey, the Toronto Maple Leafs are coming to town, or hey, the Boston Bruins. They're not going to be selling their own team because there's nothing to sell.
Teams do that all the time. As a Met fan, I can't tell you how many emails I get from the Phillies on deals for Met games, and I take most of them. So they know that.
I mean, I'm not saying that the Sabres are bereft of talent. They have some good young players. I think Middlestad's going to be a good pro, and I think Cousins is going to be good, and Dahlin, I think, can be a really, and we'll see about Owen Power in a few years. But the here and the now, they filled their rosters with Vinny Hinostrozas, and
they're going to probably have to market Skinner, I guess. I don't know.
Well, all right. Finally, today, and I can't believe it's this long ago, but 1988, I did the math, and it's 33 years ago. The 33rd anniversary of the day that shook professional hockey, which is the Wayne Gretzky trade from the Edmonton Oilers to the LA Kings. And the whole deal was Gretzky, McSorley, and Krushelnyski for Jimmy Carson, Martin Jelena, 3 first-round picks, and $15 million. And that's $15 million in 1988 money. So that's serious money. And apparently
$1 billion this day.
Yeah. And apparently Peter Pocklington was in deep financial trouble. So
yeah.
But the funny thing and I've heard this a couple times, Kev, is that LA won the bidding war, but it was very close that Arthur Griffiths, the owner of the Vancouver Canucks, very close to him going to Vancouver, and how things would have changed in the NHL, because if they didn't go to the Kings, then that, Anaheim Ducks and San Jose Sharks and all the Western expansion probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it was so big. Again, I was at USA Today, and in my career, hockey didn't get on 1A very often. I think it was 4 or 5 times, but it did that day when Wayne Gretzky got traded. And I remember that I had a quote, I believe it was from Brian Burke, who basically said, it's the same as Babe Ruth getting traded. And I think that's how I ended up getting on 1A, because that brought it home for people. And, I quoted people from Madison Avenue who said, there are people in the league that can't name one team in the NHL, but they know Wayne Gretzky's the greatest player.
Right.
And it was I remember people discussing the uniqueness of his name and the fact that he was so miles ahead of everyone else in terms of points, and the uniqueness of his story and his personality, and all of everything that was predicted came to pass. He did have that impact. He immediately went on. I can't remember. It might have been Thrifty Cars. I can't remember. But he immediately got a national commercial, and he was involved in a lot of, commercial work and endorsements and stuff. Yeah. And it really put the league on the map. It really did. And he was the perfect ambassador, because he is a, very credible spokesperson, and he's a very polite person, and, he wasn't going to get in any trouble. So,
right.
Everything about that trade on and off the ice was incredible.
Yeah, I remember when it happened, and the initial thought was, well, I guess anybody could get traded if Wayne Gretzky could get traded.
Yeah.
That was definitely the thought about it. But to me, what I don't understand, Kevin, you could explain this to me. I'm trying to get the voting results of the Calder Award when he was at first in the league, and Ray Bourque won it, and I don't even have Gretzky in the list.
He wasn't eligible.
Players not allowed?
He wasn't eligible. Yeah, that was one of the rules when the annexation. Yeah, and the annexation was that he would not be eligible for rookie.
But that's not fair, really, if you think about it.
He wasn't. Well, Russ, was it fair that he was never drafted in the NHL?
No, right. But I say it like this: the NHL has this beef with the WHA to this day, but the fact that it shouldn't matter what league a guy comes from. If he's in your league and he's a first-year player and he's 19 years old, he should be eligible for the award.
Yeah, but it was a different. They were coming off a war, and it was, and they were in bad shape. The WHA wasn't. They couldn't dictate any terms. They were just happy to get annexed. Basically.
Because I'm pretty sure he'd have won, right, Kev? He'd have won overboard.
Yeah, he would. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But the fact that the Oilers got to keep him,
right?
That was the one, thing that they gave him, is that the Oilers got to keep Gretzky. So,
and like you said, on a marketing perspective, like Gretzky, we always saw was on like Canadian cereal boxes and all that stuff. But then that changed. He was like on American cereal boxes and
Yeah.
all of that. And that generated, with cards, and that generated a lot of business.
And the the NHL really wasn't ready to market him like they would be today. Like,
Right.
Gary Bettman has modernized the marketing approach. I mean, you can argue that they still don't do enough. But
No, compared to John Ziegler, no,
correct.
they do a lot.
Yeah, they weren't ready for it. And like if that had happened under someone else, it could have been even better.
Oh,
And it's impossible to ever win a trade where the greatest hockey player or one of the greatest hockey players is traded. But Edmonton, and they ended up winning another Stanley Cup without Gretzky. But in that trade, they got Jimmy Carson, who had a great career up to that point, and he scored 49 goals the following year. And then they flipped him to Detroit for a deal involving Adam Graves and Peter Klima. But Martin Jelena, good career, but not a great player. The 3 first-round picks, the best player of the 3 was Martin Ruchinski. I mean, it turned out to be an absolutely terrible deal for Edmonton. And of course, the main factor here was Pocklington got $15 million. He sold Wayne Gretzky. He didn't trade Wayne Gretzky.
No, I mean, he needed the cash. The cash was the big part.
Yeah, it was big to him. And, when he was out, Gretzky was the highest paid. Now, he wasn't earning much, but he was the highest paid player, and he didn't have to pay him anymore. So.
Yep, and he still won.
I will tell you this. There's one funny thing about Gretzky, because we talked about commercials. One time I got to interview Bret Hart, and I asked him about the McDonald's commercial he did in Canada with Wayne Gretzky, and he did put a wrestling move on Wayne Gretzky, and people were like freaking out when they were doing that. Like, they were like, "You can't hurt Wayne Gretzky, you can't." And he wasn't going to.
You want
to bet? Really funny that they were actually in the wrestling ring, and they were like freaking out because Wayne Gretzky's in the wrestling ring with Bret Hart.
I'll show you who can hurt Wayne Gretzky. All right, guys, great show. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For the departed Anthony Mangione, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.